Amakua aloha mahalo. E hopa mai kai. Ike hale. Ame ike po imanu. Mama. Blessings to this place and all these people gathered here. Welcome you all. This is a presentation of Aloha International. My name is Serge Kahili King, and this is our Sunday afternoon talk story. We like to start also with a blessing, and I'm going to have two of our staff do that. Susan Neal-Floyd and Lois Stokes, both of whom are wonderful teachers in their own right.
Aloha. It's my first time in 4 months. I've been traveling and helping my mom rehabilitate. So I'm feeling she had a hip replacement on the mainland. This is our first time back here, so we're very grateful, very happy. And our idea for sharing a blessing this morning is a song that's uplifting, and Lois had the same song in her heart, so we thought we'd sing it. And there's 3 main Hawaiian words in it. The first one is ike, that's understanding, awareness, to know. And the second one is aloha, we know that is happiness. And the last one is malama, to care for. And the words say, if you want to be understood, then give understanding. If you want love, happiness, then be happy, give happiness. And the last one, if you want care or to be cared for, then give care, give help, give assistance. So it's a beautiful, inspiring song, and it's all from the creator, from Keakua. It's that kind of care and understanding and love. So here we go. And you can sing along if you want. It's real easy to catch the word.
Ikawaka hiko, mamua loa okapena kuke. Once upon a time, long before Captain Cook, there was a most wondrous man who lived in these islands, and his name was Maui. Now, Maui is a very magical kind of person, a character in legend and stories known all throughout the Pacific. Stories everywhere, mostly in Polynesia, but not only. And even in Hawaii, all the different islands have different stories about Maui, about where he was born, what he did, and how he did things. So the story that we're going to talk about today is from Big Island. One particular story. In this really ancient, distant time, when you went near a forest or walked through a forest, you would hear all these wonderful, sweet sounds of singing, different melodies, of chirping sometimes, very happily. You might hear a fluttering sound that resembled the wind sighing through the trees, but you wouldn't see anything. So the sounds were there, and over all the islands, there was this mysterious sound. They were birds, but no one could see them in those days, except one person. Maui could see them. Because Maui had, he had something called Ike Papalua, which is like second sight. And he had the ability to see a lot of different things that other people couldn't see. And one of them was, he could see the birds. But even to Maui, the birds at that time looked like little ghostly spirits. But he knew where they were, he knew what they were doing, and he learned how to communicate with them, and he became really good friends with them. And he was really pleased too. Maui always liked to feel a little special. So the special thing here was that he could see them and no one else could. And that kind of gave him a little bit of pleasure. He was that kind of guy. So this went on for a while, and Maui was quite content with that being the way things were, until one day there was a kupua. Now, Maui was called Maui Kupua. Kupua is a Hawaiian word that refers to someone with exceptional magical abilities. And so there were many kupuas with different kinds of abilities in Hawaiian legend. Maui had probably more than anyone else, but so he had the title Maui Kupua. Maui the Kupua. And actually, Maui could do all the things that a shaman could do. So in a way, we might think that Maui was the archetypal Polynesian shaman. At any rate, there were kupua on the other islands as well. One day, a kupua from Kauai decided to come and pay a visit. And so he came down, and Maui met him, and they sat around the poi bowl. This is how they used to do it in the old days. When they served poi, for instance, when here comes the kupua, the first thing Maui would say would be, "Hele mai ai, come and eat." And they'd sit down, and they had a wooden bowl, probably made of Milo. That's what they often use for the food bowls. And they would sit around, and with their fingers, they would reach in all together. It could be a whole family doing it, but, or just a guest. They reach in there with their fingers, and they eat the poi. And they had, depending on the rains, how much things grew, how much food was available, they had 1 finger, 2 finger, and 3 finger poi. In Hawaiian tradition, it was also not just whether the rains, it was also how stingy the person was. Okay? Because you might have a lot of rain and a lot of food, but somebody will serve 3 finger poi, which means it took 3 fingers to get anything out of the bowl that you could eat. Okay? 1 finger poi, that was really generous, top of the line. So they were eating, this was always bowl. So they were eating 1 finger poi, talking about all kinds of different things. They talked about, the different beauties of their own island. They talked about the adventures that each one of them had had. They started talking about their own magical abilities. And so that's where they get into kind of like a challenge. Each one was trying to show off how much better he was. So for several hours there, they were challenging each other with different kinds of magical skills. And finally, when the kupua from Kauai, he fashioned a canoe, looked really like a canoe out of a tea leaf, and conjured up a little breeze to send it sailing through the air. Maui decided, well, okay, I've got to do something really spectacular. So, really to beat this guy. Now, Maui knew how to call up the winds, but that wasn't enough. He had something else in mind. So Maui whistled. He whistled to his friends. And soon, in all the trees that are around the place that they were sitting, the trees moved, the leaves moved, and this wonderful singing began, and Maui was, feeling really proud that he could call the birds and have them sing. But the kupua from Kauai said, he said, that's nice, but we have those kinds of wind spirits in Kauai too. And Maui laughed. He said, wind spirits? What do you mean wind spirits? These are birds. And the other kupua said, I don't know what you mean by a bird, but they're wind spirits. And I'm sure of that. And Maui started to get angry, but then he suddenly realized, I don't have any way to prove that there's birds here unless I let him see them. And I don't want him to have the same power I do, that nobody else has. So Maui said to himself, he says, okay, that's it. I'm going to make him visible to everybody. So because Maui didn't have superpowers, you know, he was called Maui Kupui. And many people writing about the old legends have compared him to Hercules, the Greek Hercules, or compared him to Mercury, who was also a shamanic kind of figure, a messenger and a guy that played tricks and had a lot of different powers. But in more recent times, very well-known Hawaiian singer, Israel Kanakawiwa Ole, he called him the Hawaiian Superman. And so he could do some things not only better, but faster than any other person. So working really, really fast, faster than the eye could see. He made some black dye out of the roasted, he roasted the kukui nuts, not the nuts themselves, the shells. And out of the carbon from the shells, he made this black dye. And he looked around at the birds and he picked one, the mamo, because they all had different names. And so he painted the mamo all black. And that's, we know him today as the black honey creeper. But, you know, that all black just wasn't good enough. He did that with the crow, and it just, you know, wasn't very exciting. So he added he got some olena, some turmeric, and boiled it up, and painted some of the feathers yellow. On the mamo, he painted a couple feathers up on top of the tail, and a couple feathers under the tail. And well, okay, then he had some dye left over, so he picked another one, the o'o. Painted him all black too. But then he painted yellow feathers under each wing, just to be different. Okay. And he went around looking for what else he could do, and he saw the iiwi bird. And all these birds so far are what they're called honey creepers or honey eaters. And the iiwi was another one. So he decided he got the juice of the noni fruit, made a very red dye, painted them all red. And then he saw another one, another honey eater. And he said, well, okay, I want to be a little different this time. So this was the apapane. And he gave him a red body and black wings. But now, you know, he's realized there's lots of birds. And, you know, this is taking more time than he wanted to take, so we decided to speed things up. So he took the bark of certain trees, and he took some of different roots and of different flowers, and he made up a mixture of different shades of brown, black, gray, white, and he just scattered them with all the other birds, like the owl, the pueo, and the eel, the hawk, and the elipaio, a tiny little bird that finds the right trees for canoes, and got them all brown, black, and white, and gray. And so then he waves his magic wand made of kawila wood, and whoom, suddenly all the birds are visible. Whoa. Not only all the birds were visible right there, but his magic was so great that all the birds became visible over all the islands. And there were cries of wonder and cries of delight. The Kupua from Kauai was really impressed. Maui, of course, was very, very happy with that. And so, you know, he left, you know, singing the praises of Maui, and Maui basked in that glory for a few days. But, you know, that gets kind of boring after a while. So he was looking around for something else to do. So he was sitting watching, you know, the birds in the sky, because now he could see them. It was a delight to watch. And he watched them flying, and he watched them soaring and gliding through the air. And suddenly he got an idea and said, you know, I'd like to have my own bird, that I could make it fly through the air. But he said, I'd want to be able to control it so it only goes where I want it to go. So how can I do that? So he began experimenting. You know, he could call up winds so the winds could help him. He experimented. Finally came up with an object that was made of very, very light tapa cloth. That's the cloth made of bark that they used for clothing. But this was very light. He had it, you know, bound it together with a frame made of hau wood. Hau is a tree here that is very much like balsa, very lightweight. And so he got some string made of the bark of the hau tree, was used to make string and rope a lot. So he made some string and called up the wind. He was able to get a kite flying. Now kites, they didn't really have a word for that, so he gave it the word, lupe, because that's the same name as the stingray. And the stingray looked a lot like his kite. So he's flying this, and then he's teaching, so he has more fun, he's teaching other people how to do it, and they found a lot of good uses for that. One of the things they used it for, in those old days, was a weather forecaster. Because when they get a kite, they get it flying, they tie it to something, and as long as the kite was flying, they knew good weather was not only there, but going to be around. But if the kite suddenly fell down, they didn't use these words, but we would call it a low pressure system, which was a sign of an oncoming storm. And so then they knew they had to get things away, put it away, and prepare for the storm. That was one thing. The other thing that they did, and I have to remind you, the original of this legend was recorded in 1910. But the other thing that they did, according to the legend, is they made kites that they would use to pull their canoes across the ocean when they were going between the islands, when the winds were right. So we think of that as a modern sport today, but no, it's done in ancient times. So everything was going fine, but Maui wasn't satisfied. He didn't want a kite like everybody else. He wanted bigger. He wanted better. He had to keep going. So he kept building bigger ones and bigger ones and bigger ones. Finally, he got this gigantic kite. And it was big. It was made of lauhala. Same thing they used to make later on. They made sails out of it. Okay? And it had really, really strong, flexible bamboo, long poles of bamboo holding it together. And he didn't have house string, he had olona rope. Olona was the toughest fiber the Hawaiians had for tying the canoes and things together. And so he decided to call up the winds. And he called the winds of Waipio Valley, and he called the winds of Hilo Bay, and got them all excited, and they came rushing in. And they lifted up his kite. Oh, he was great, but he wanted to go higher. So he called the winds to get stronger and stronger, and they got stronger, and it lifted it higher and higher. And Maui's laughing. Now, Maui was doing this, and finally he's going to have to anchor his kite, so he was in the Wailuku River, just above Rainbow Falls. He's anchored it to some of the lava there, and the wind was blowing it and trying to get the kite up to the heavens, and the Olona was holding it real tight to the ground, and it was stretching out, and Maui was laughing and dancing. At some point, man-made stuff has to give way to nature, no matter whether it's magic or not. And finally, that's what happened. The Olona just couldn't take it any longer. That's not what it was meant for. And boom, it breaks. Off goes the kite to become a plaything of the winds. And so Maui just laughed at that, That was fun, that was beautiful, he was happy. It was time to do something else. And so we don't really know what happened to Maui after that, because we know that some people say he died, because what he did, he left the islands. Some people say he died, some people say he just is still wandering out among the stars looking for different adventures. What we do know is that one time when a tsunami hit and came into Hilo Bay, it pulled his canoe up out of the bay and up the Wailuku River, right down just below the Wailuku Bridge. Anybody goes there when they're in Hilo. And it was a magical canoe, and it turned to stone, and you can see the two stones that were the parts of Maui's canoe still there in the river today. We also know that we can see the places where he tied the kite to the riverbed, because when he was holding it, before he actually anchored it, we can see his footprints in the rocks, leaving these deep kind of potholes where he was standing, pulling really hard to try and keep the kite down. And so we can see those things. But whatever happened, okay, what we know is that Maui made the birds visible, Maui developed the kites, Maui was a man of wondrous power. Pipihola Kika'au, and so goes the story. Now we turn from the story to our topic for the day. The topic for the day is the world is what you think it is. And the way we're looking at that is in terms of different worldviews. The story shows us some of the worldview of the ancient Hawaiians. They thought of the world as a magical place. They had names and stories and histories and relationships for all the forces of nature. So that for them, that would make them easier to understand, easier to deal with, less terribly frightening. Of course, you can always get frightened with Pele's lava and, you know, some of the other things that happened, but still, by giving them names and stories, they would learn more about them and share that with each other. They thought the world was a place of danger and delight, a place of potential adventure and joy. And, you know, they had this worldview, and everything was alive, aware, and responsive. Now we could call it, we talked to the winds, you could talk to the birds. Other people could learn how to do that as well. Even the ordinary Hawaiians would talk to the rocks that they used for their ovens, and they became family members. Then there Europeans and Americans came with a completely different worldview. Different names for the forces of nature. Different stories to tell about them. Different ideas about human beings and their connection with the world and with each other. And those two very different systems didn't match very well. And they still don't. Some years ago, I attended a lecture. It was by a Hawaiian geologist, scientist. And he gave a lecture on how the islands were formed by volcanic action. And when he finished, he said, "Now that's the Western legend. Let me tell you how it really happened." Then he told us how Wakea Sky Father mated with Papa Earth Mother, and Papa gave birth to the islands. Okay? That was Hawaiian geology. But it was very cute the way he presented it, as this is how it really happened. Okay? Just showing a really strong difference in worldview. When I was in Africa, I lived in a country called Senegal. Now, it used to be a colony of France. And the French tried for 300 years to impose their worldview on the Senegalese. And they, as they put it, they wanted to make them into black Frenchmen. And they really tried hard. And while I was there, the president of Senegal even had a white French wife. But 2 miles outside of town, none of the people spoke French, and they didn't have a French worldview. In the capital, you could walk by a school and see all these really nice black African kids saying, you could hear them reciting their lessons, their school lessons. The most common one you'd hear would be, "Nous les Gaulois," which means we the Gauls. And that's how they would begin their history lessons. So the French were really trying to do this, but it never took. Okay. Another place where worldviews don't match, can't mix. We often experience a lot of that kind of thing personally. Because the worldview is not just your view of big things. It's not just religion, not about politics, not about world peace. All the things in your life are involved in your worldview of your life. And that worldview is what gives you the experience that you have. And so the things you think about your own body, about your mind, about other people, about your personal relationships, about health and healing, about making money, about all these different kinds of things in your life, they're all part of your worldview too. And your worldview is going to have a big effect on what you can do and what you can't do. What your possibilities are, where they're blocked. It's got nothing to do with life. We can look around and see all kinds of people doing different things in different ways to see that. But the worldview you have can create opportunities for you, and it can also block you in certain areas. What I want to present is only one simple idea, one simple technique that can give you a way to change your worldview about some things if you want to. It's really, really simple. And so let's begin with, let's do an experiment. So for this experiment, what I'd like you to do is sit up straight, if you don't mind. This is all voluntary. And I'd like you to turn your head to the right as far as you can. And with your eyes, look and see the farthest thing you can see. Now don't move your shoulders, keep your shoulders straight. But turn your head as far as you can, look and see what you can see. Okay, bring it back. Now what I'd like you to do is to imagine that you are an owl. Now owls can swivel their head all the way and look backwards, right? So what I'd like you to do now is imagine that you are an owl, and you of course have the head of an owl. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to keep your physical head where it is, but imagine that your owl head is turning around all the way and looking directly behind you. Just imagine that. All right, bring your owl head back facing the front. Now, open your eyes if they were closed, and turn to your right physically and see how far you can see. And what I'd like to ask is, how many people could see farther the second time? Yeah, almost everybody. You were suddenly able to do something that you couldn't do before. And all you did was to imagine something different, something actually fantastical. And yet, it had an effect on your physical body. Because what we call your subconscious or your body mind doesn't care about fantastic or little, except whatever you imagine and try to follow it. Your emotions, your body itself will try to do that. If you didn't see anything further, if you wanted to work on a little more vivid imagination, that would help a lot. Because it will happen. The body will change what it can do. There are so many ways. You know, the point of this is not to be able to see farther. The point is that you can use this very simple technique in lots of different ways to change different parts of your worldview in order to change your life, if you want to. As an example, okay? You can change, for instance, let's say that you had high blood pressure or anxiety. These create physical symptoms. If you would imagine that you were sitting on the bank of a river, maybe your feet are in the water, the river's flowing by real slowly, and you look up at the sky and you can see puffy white clouds in the blue sky, hardly moving. If you can imagine that, your blood pressure will start to come down, your anxiety will start to calm down, your mind and body will calm down. You may have to spend a little more than a few seconds. But if you really imagine that, your body and your mind will change, your feelings. That's one way to use it for health. When I was really cold, I remember in skiing one time, and I was outside heading up, it was very cold out, and heading up to the top of the ski lift, and my hands were starting to freeze up. I just built a fire underneath it. Imagine the fire was warming my hands. And by the time I got to the ski lift, my hands were warm. My body followed my imagination. You can think of a lot of different kinds of things that you could imagine that might affect different aspects of your own health and healing. If you, I'll put it this way, if you go into a very expensive store and you imagine that you have all the money you need, all the money that you can buy anything in the store, you might even imagine you've got the money to buy the store. If you play with that a few times, it's going to change how you feel. It's going to lessen your fear of money. It's going to be able to help you think about it more clearly, help you find more opportunities to make more. And I know that because that's what I used, and I really seriously needed wanted to increase my level of prosperity. That was one of the important techniques I used for that, because it changed how I felt about money. And it was just pure imagination. And imagining that I could buy whatever was around me. That's health and wealth. Happiness. Relationships with other people. One of the interesting things that you can do, if you want to, there's lots of stuff, I'm just giving you examples. You can imagine that there's all kinds of people, maybe some you know, maybe some you don't, but they are praising you and giving you compliments. Just lots of them, how wonderful you are, telling you how great you are. And maybe they're clapping when you enter a room. Okay? And it works even better if you say thank you and acknowledge what they're doing. It sounds like, in a way, it sounds almost like a silly thing, but it's going to help you feel better about yourself. And when you feel better about yourself, it's the most curious thing in the world, other people start feeling better about you. Okay? Not 100%, can't change everybody, but you'd be surprised. You get some real surprises if you start to do that, of how people you never thought you could get along with suddenly are easier to get along with. And it's because of how you think about yourself, and all you have to do is use imagination to do that. As a last example, if there's a talent or a skill that you want to develop, one of the best things you can do is watch somebody, either live or on TV or video. Watch what they're doing. Somebody who has that skill, who knows how to do it well, watch them very carefully and imagine that you are that person doing it. You don't have to become them or anything like that. Just simple imagine that you're the person and you are doing what they are doing. This is exactly how I learned how to ski in my 40s. I did this on the slopes. And I watched for an hour, tried it out, fell down, watched for another hour, more carefully. And by the end of the day, I was skiing intermediate. Low intermediate, but still, that improved. And all I did was imagine that I was doing what I saw these other people doing. It's such a simple thing, such a wonderful thing. It doesn't take a lot of work, it doesn't take a lot of effort. And if you're willing to do it, it can change your life. Do you have any comments or questions on that? Yes?
Well, I used to have a worldview of I hate hospitals, and I would work on that many years ago when I started Huna to visit friends that were in the hospital. And I guess I did pretty good with that change, but when Mom had this fall, I had to go with her. I didn't have to. I wanted to go with her through the whole ordeal of the operation and the recovery and the rehabilitation. And I stayed with her. Now, when she was in for a heart stent, that was like 2.5 days. That was real easy to just sleep on the chair, be there for that length of time. But this time was a little bit longer. And I was able to sleep on the floor and just enjoy being there. I didn't realize how radical that was until my little brother came to the hospital to watch Mom while my big brother and I went looking for a rehab place. We were gone under 2 hours, and as soon as I walked in the door, he gave me a hug and he ran out. He was so stressed, and he never came back to the hospital. He came once in a while to the rehab place, but we're talking 2 months.
Sure. Some people get very stressed. She's talking about how she was able to be with her mother when her mother was very ill, and it didn't bother her at all. She could stay with her, she could sleep in the room, but it was her brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, her brother couldn't. 2 hours and he had it.
Yeah.
Because people start thinking different things about where they are and about this and about that, and that's what stress is about. So she had a worldview that helped her do this more easily. Other people couldn't have lasted 2 hours. Okay? That was pretty good, actually. Let me give you another little example of this. One of my students years ago was a very prominent surgeon in the San Francisco area. And he came to one of my classes, And he heard about this stuff. He hadn't heard about my particular way of teaching it, but he was intrigued by it. And so he went back. What he specialized in, he was specialized in bones and repairing the bones. Orthopedic surgeon, yeah, he was an orthopedic surgeon. So he went back to, and started working again. He had a case of a young woman who came in with a shattered elbow. And he said that one of the worst kinds. He said the typical thing that happens, no matter how good you are, no matter how well you work with it, after the surgery, the day after, he said it is terribly swollen, extremely painful, just sitting there, and you can't bend your arm. So while he's doing his surgery, this is a multitasker, because he decided at the same time to experiment with some of the things I had talked about. So what he did was a form of imagination. While he's doing his very expert surgery, he's imagining that the bones and the nerves and the blood vessels can communicate with him. Well, listen to him when he talks to them. And so he kind of pictured that in his mind. So while he's doing the surgery, he's talking to the nerves and telling them what to do, telling the blood vessels, when to give more blood, when to hold it back, talking to the bones to knit each other. So he's just doing this. He did this for an hour during the surgery, he told me. And he said in his mind, he kept doing it for an hour after the surgery. And then he let it go. He said when he came in to see the girl the next morning, she was in her teens. When he came in to see the girl the next morning, the first thing that astonished him was that there was no swelling. The second thing was that she was not in any pain. And the third thing was when she moved her arm like this with no trouble. He said never, ever in his whole history of practice had he had that kind of result from the surgery. And the only thing he could attribute it to was what he had done with his mind, with his imagination during the surgery. That's pretty, a lot more physicians and doctors of different kinds could include that in their work. We've had some more fantastic healings than we do now.
I would really like to say something in response to both of these comments, because I was in the hospital in ICU for a month, and my worldview is that I don't like those places either at all, and so I wouldn't allow anyone near me or to see me or anything like that, because I didn't want to put anybody through anything. My ego thought that somebody cared. I guess that's humor. Okay, but what I noticed through this was the last 4 years I was supposed to be dead. And what I've noticed about my experience and other people who are outside of me is that it's not about me. It's about their worldview and their projection. And it's about their fears. And they're thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen to me? What if that happened to me? What if this, what if that? And who's my family? And who would care about me? And all this stuff, every kind of thing you can imagine, and nothing to do with me.
That's right.
Nothing to do with me. But everybody had to tell me what they thought of me. So I thought, well, I guess I don't want to live. But I changed my mind, I guess. So I don't know. But it's very fascinating, this worldview thing, especially culturally. It's just so fascinating to me, and especially with blended families and everything that you're talking about, because we're talking about cultural and values conflicts that, like you say, it's just like Senegal. And if I happened to get into one of those. And so, escaping from that was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Decades of that, what do you call it, cultural abuse. The mind, not validating. We're talking about validation with each other, right? And whatever it is, respect or death with dignity or all of that stuff.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm going to just summarize that very quickly, just very quickly. She was telling us about her experience in the hospital and what she experienced. All kinds of experience of realization that was stressing out the other people was their thoughts and their thoughts about themselves and what would happen to them if that happened to them. Would there be people to help? All of their thoughts were centered around almost like, what if that happened to me? And that's what produced so much of the stress. And somehow, she's not quite sure how, but somehow she changed her mind about it and realized that had nothing, the problem was not her, it was what other people were thinking about themselves. That was a good little, that was a good realization.
And my worldview of me
And your
was the
worldview
real
of you,
shock.
yes.
This is the shock.
Right,
You know, that's the Johari window, the part of ourselves that we can see, the
Yeah.
hidden part, the part we show the world, the part we know of ourselves, and the hidden stuff.
right.
The hidden stuff just pops out.
It does under certain
Everywhere.
circumstances. And the reason sometimes, you know, where the hidden stuff pops out, it's not because there's something trying to stop you or hold you back. It's because some part of you wants a solution from you. Some part of you wants to think differently, wants you to think differently. Some part of you wants to take action in some way that'll lessen the pain and lessen the fear. And so this inner part of you tells you what isn't working. And it's a signal to do something different. Because as a lot of people said in different kinds of ways, you know, you can't expect a different result if you keep doing the same thing. Okay? It doesn't work. And so all these, you know, problems and things that come up are only to give us a chance to act differently, to think differently, to feel differently. Okay? Because we all have the basic fundamental urge to move toward pleasure and away from pain. And the only time some part of you pulls up pain is to let you know that you're not moving toward pleasure. That something you're doing isn't helping. And that's usually the way you think about things. Because that's what governs your action. Okay? Different people can have different reasons, but that's very common. Anything else? Doesn't have to be about the same topic.
I'm
Yes.
wondering about using my imagination to have someone treat me differently.
Yes,
Then, like, let's say there's some mode that's the way we usually operate
all
with
right.
somebody. And if I do what you're suggesting, I should be able to, or I could try, to project a different experience, or a lighter one, or a more loving, or softer, a better one, whatever I think that would be.
Sure, that's right. You-
And then
You will-
hopefully they would get my message without me saying, you
Yeah,
should
yeah,
do
right.
that, you brat.
Well, that would work.
How do you do that? Just sit there.
All right, let me give you
politely.
something that really, really works. It's really a combination of a couple things, and it always works if you'll do it. First, imagine your relationship being different. Okay? There's different ways of doing that. One of the fun ways of doing it, if you want, is what we call playing catch. You imagine that you're with the other person, and you're playing catch with a ball of some kind. Now, if your relationship isn't great, very often the first thing that comes automatically into your imagination is that they're trying to hit you with the ball. Well, this is your imagination, remember. Okay, you have the power to dodge that. You have the power to make the ball something soft. You have the power to talk to them and say, let's play a different game. And use your imagination to keep working at it until it's easier to toss the ball. You're having fun with each other. This is one big thing. Okay? And that has changed a lot of relationships by itself. Now, if you'll add something to that, it'll make it even better. But imagine them, and imagine whatever you can that you think is true. Imagine something good about them. It's amazing what different people can have. But a short little story to illustrate this. I was teaching this in a class one time, and about the power of this, complimenting people silently. And this woman came up, a friend of mine, and after the class, and she began to go on about this neighbor of hers that she was having trouble with. And she started to do it and remembered the teaching. And she said, and that woman has very pretty shoes. That was the only thing she could think of. But that was the beginning of a breakthrough. See? So you imagine this game where you're being able to get along, and then you imagine what is it about them that is worthy of appreciation? And there might be a lot of things that you think aren't, but see if you can find at least one. Now I'm going to give you the fail-safe appreciation, okay, that can never go wrong because it's absolutely true. To be the greatest effect, it's got to be something true about them. Okay? Well, this is true. Whenever they exhale, they feed the plants of the world. Now that's a scientific fact. And that's always something that you can use if you can't think of anything else. That's something good. But playing the game until you can play peacefully and having fun, and then find something to appreciate about them. Make it sincere. And that will have seen the most remarkable change around in people doing that. Most remarkable, I'll just share this briefly, the most remarkable was in Tahiti, where I taught this in a course of Tahitians and French. And a Tahitian woman had been in a 10-year-long lawsuit with her sister over some property. They didn't speak to each other, they only communicated through their attorneys. And I said, okay, well tonight, just think of whatever you can. Remember the times when you played together as children. Think of something that you can and just send her some compliments. So she actually did it, which is wonderful when a student does what you suggest. So she actually did it. The next morning, she told me, later, she got a telephone call from her sister directly and said, look, let's stop all of this and make peace with it.
Wow.
The sister wanted to be loved, but all of this stuff was in the way of both of them, so one of them made the bridge. And without saying anything about it, the other one spontaneously reacted. Yes?
I have a suggestion too. I mean, this might work for somebody. That if you just use Gestalt therapy and you take a chair, you put the chair there and you sit in your chair, and the person that you're in conflict with, if you imagine that they're in their chair, right? And you speak to them, right, with feeling or your position or whatever it is, and then you let them speak back. And you go over to the other chair, because now you're them, right? And so you speak back to you, from whatever's going on with you, and then you go back over here, now you're yourself again. And you keep doing that. And it's amazing, because it has worked every time for me. It'll come to resolution, it'll really come to the heart, the crying part, if that's the kind of learner you are. We're all different kinds of learners.
Now, in a way, that's exactly the same thing, but the chairs and the movement is helping to focus. Sometimes it's hard to do the whole thing in your mind. So that is a very good benefit. Okay, yes.
It's funny how I use the same thing, but in a different way. Mom loves to play ball. When she was in therapy, she learned to have these big balloons blown up, and she lays the ball for hours. She can play. Easy for her, she's sitting down. We're having to run over and chase the balls. But when I was playing it, one time she was really mad at me, so I got out the ball, and she started to play because she loves this game, but she was hitting it really hard, like she was mad. And so I realized that, okay, it's a game, but it's also symbolic. But what happens is I started to praise her for her strength, for being able to hit that ball. And because she was getting back the compliments, she started to change. So I was first remembering the technique, the inner technique where we used to do this a long time ago, and I go, wow, so this is the symbolic is out here in the real world. But it's changing things, because I'm changing to start complimenting her even in this angry state for something good. And she changed. A few minutes of this ball game, and she was like,
Yeah, beautiful. I'll summarize that one briefly. Because she was remembering a time when she was playing actual ball with her mother. And her mother was angry and was hitting it back hard. And so Susan began complimenting her on how strong she was. And that changed it into a whole better experience. Very, that simple, yeah. All right, good. We are going to take a moment here. This is first of all, I want to tell you, a free meeting, and I hope you enjoy it. At the same time, our organization has some projects that you might be interested in. One of the things we do is we provide healing techniques for free throughout the world. We send booklets physical booklets to any individual anywhere in the world for free. And we have two techniques that we provide for that. One is on the spirit of blessing, which is like we were talking about, the complimenting and how to do that kind of a thing. It's a pink booklet up there that you're free to pick up. And the other one is a blue booklet with an absolutely amazing healing technique that works for all kinds of stuff. And it's nothing esoteric about it at all. It sounds a little unusual, but it really, really works. And so those are both free. We also have them online in about almost 35 different languages that people can download anywhere and share them. So that's one of the things. We do free distant healing requests when people write in, and they write on emails now. And but we'll take a letter too. We still do that kind of thing. We remember that. And we have meetings like this that we do, and all kinds of teachings and classes, and people around the world who are sharing the knowledge as well. So I'm going to pass the calabash in case any of that interests you. Just pass it around. The other thing is we're going to have a healing blessing as we finish here. In order to do that, we have these stones and other things that people have brought from all around the world. And I'm going to pass these around and ask you to pick one up. And you don't have to spend time figuring out which is the right one for you. Let it choose you. Just reach in and pick the right one. And we're going to use these for the healing. That may be for yourself or someone else you care about. Okay? So, pick one. And I'm going to ask Stuart to come up and lead that.
Does everyone have one of these now, at this point?
You sit on the floor.
Yeah. And I hope you can hang on to it better than I. I'll wait till the people in the way back can get theirs. So I invite you to take a good look at this piece of nature that is in your hand. And I invite you to consider the worldview of this piece of nature. Oh my. Perhaps it is saying, look how fast everybody does things. They come and they go. Oh my. Can't they ever just slow down like I do? Can't they ever just relax enough to just be for a while? So consider this worldview. It's very different from yours, but it's just as valid as yours. Another worldview that might be of interest is the worldview of your body. Sometime you might want to consider the story, the life story, your life story from your body's point of view, from conception on. My goodness, that's got a very different story. A lot of different things that were important. But I want you to, if you would, with me, right now, consider the worldview of the earth and our place on the earth. And consider the energy that is there in this earth. This earth that goes through so many changes and yet not much changes. And all the energy that is available to those creatures that live on this earth. So I invite you to allow the earth's energy to flow up out of the earth into you. Energy that you can use for whatever healing you want, or to amplify some aspect of your life that needs amplification. Perhaps your eyesight, your hearing, perhaps amplifying your ability to love and to open up your heart, to help heal your blood, or your bones, or your muscles. Use that energy and just pull that energy up. Pull that energy up in a way that fills you, that makes you glad, brings joy to you to be so energized. This energy of the earth that is available to you each and every moment. And you might want to think of somebody that you know that needs some extra energy too. And so bring them into your energy field. Allow them to share the earth energy with you. And help direct that energy into their bodies if they need it, or into their hearts, or into their mind. Use this energy to help heal someone else, or many others. This earth energy that's right there that we can all use at any time. You can do this anytime you like. But I invite you now to come on back, to come back into this room. Give thanks for all that earth energy. And before you put your piece of nature back in the basket, put a little bit of your energy into it that others may share that energy. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Serge. Okay, good.